You know, it's only when you look back over a full decade, not just a year, that you get a proper impression of how Australians fared over those 10 years. From the emergence of China and the impact of one president on the world to the fact that we've had 5 prime ministers and the controversy over climate change. One man who's followed it all through the prism of the economy is Adam Creighton from the Australian. He joined me just before coming to air this afternoon. Adam Creighton, Happy New Year to you.
Likewise, Chris. Happy New Year.
Yeah, thank you. I can't help but go back to what Malcolm Turnbull said in the middle part of the last decade about these are the most exciting times to be alive. That was probably true, but he may have added one other word, which was the word turbulent. Would you agree?
Yes, look, I think that's right, and I think that that comment actually just came a little bit before the 2016 election, which, of course, he almost lost. So I don't think it sat very well with the electorate. And indeed, if you look at survey evidence, when researchers ask people what they thought about the decade, they generally say concerned or overwhelmed or anxious, rather than empowered or excited or indeed excited. So I think maybe, you know, for the elites of society, I think the past decade's been fantastic. There's been very strong income growth for the top, but for the middle ranks, it's been pretty stagnant.
One of the things that have probably hampered our progression is the fact that we've been through 5 prime ministers.
Yeah, look, I think that's certainly true, and I think that reflects a decline in the quality of our politics, actually, I think, in Australia, and it's hard to put a finger on what's caused that. I think maybe the resource boom, which of course insulated us from the worst of the financial crisis, kind of you know, made us drop the ball on kind of genuine reform and you know, focusing on things that matter. You know, we certainly haven't come out of the other end of that yet. We can, you know, I still personally think that federal government, state governments, you know, they are overwhelmingly nowhere near as interested in genuine reform as they used to be, and it's just all slogans and politics now.
Yeah, the big ticket items seem to be items that they avoid very quickly. You mentioned about this research and people's reaction or summary reaction to what they thought of the last decade, and one of the words that came up in that McCrindle research was the word fatigue. I think it's fair to say when it comes to work hours and income, the two haven't kept pace, especially when it comes to income.
Yeah, well, certainly just on income, I mean, that's probably the single biggest change, I would say. So the typical household income in Australia went up by 32% to about $80,500 from the decade to 2009. But since then, it's actually slightly lower. So it's actually $100 lower. So over all that period since, basically, they've moved sideways. And so you can understand a level of frustration from ordinary Australians who were used to fairly rapid increases in their standard of living, and of course that's all adjusting for inflation, obviously, but there hasn't been that much since, and indeed that's not just an Australian phenomenon. Of course, that's kind of a Western world phenomenon, if you like. And actually, you could argue we've had it much better. Actually, it's kind of wages growth here really only fell off a cliff in about 2012, 2013, whereas it's been stagnant for much longer in the US and the UK.
Interesting. And we should balance all of that with the fact that those who've got their patch of land, those who have property, are still seeing their house prices increase, even in the last 12 months.
No, look, certainly that's true. There's been a very rapid bounce back recently. I think the annualised rates of growth in Sydney and Melbourne are something like 20 and 30% at the moment, and certainly if there's a further Reserve Bank rate cut in February, which is likely, that will continue. It's a very divisive issue, of course, because if you don't own a home, then you're not richer. In fact, you're poorer when house prices go up, because you can't afford, you know, kind of one of the basic requirements of living, if you like, but for the 2/3 of households that do own, I guess it does make them feel better about themselves, feel richer, and indeed the statistical evidence suggests that they do tend to spend more when house prices go up, and certainly the RBA has been waiting for some sort of bounce back there in consumption growth.
And look, it's been a decade dominated by royal commissions. We've had a royal commission into aged care, we've had a royal commission into religious institutions and sexual assault of young people. We've had a royal commission or an inquiry into the banks. All up, it's led to a great deal of trust being lost in our institutions, hasn't it?
Well, certainly you could also say that the Royal Commissions are a symptom of the loss of trust, if you like, of of an angry electorate and politicians calling these Royal Commissions to try to appear to be doing something. I mean, I'm a bit sceptical about what they're all for, really. They certainly cost an enormous amount of money and they certainly enrich the legal profession and the consulting profession, but actually not that much changes, in my view, after these Royal Commissions. Indeed, I'm looking forward to writing shortly a kind of 1 year on from the Banking Royal Commission and just having a look at what has actually changed. And I think you'll find not very much, actually.
If you're looking at a graph of technological change in the world, and you'd have to include Australia in this, I see a very steep incline with technology in that past decade. It almost seems as if everyone has a smartphone, everyone's got access to Mr. Google or Miss Google, and we're being able to do productive work so much more quickly than we ever have before.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I think the biggest change in people's lives is that they have the internet in their pocket now. That's an extraordinary development, really. They basically have, the sum total of human knowledge, effectively, is in their pocket, which is
amazing.
A feat that is unimaginable a decade even ago, or certainly 2 decades. And it's kind of brought us, closer together. I mean, there are 2.4 billion people on Facebook. You can contact people all around the world any time of the day for free, something that would have cost a fortune 20 years ago. But the interesting thing about the development of such communication technology is it's not shown up in productivity statistics yet. And indeed, this was a puzzle in the 80s too, with the advent of computers. They didn't seem for a while to actually boost productivity. And indeed, productivity, if you talk to economists in Australia, they'll complain about how it's been falling. Indeed, it's been zero for the past couple of years in Australia.
It does make
as you
sense.
say, we have had a transformation in our lives. So it's a bit of a puzzle. Some cynics say this technology just means we waste more time. In essence, we're always on our phones. We can't concentrate at work. We're always looking up on Facebook or posting images. I mean, I think that's a bit excessive. I think it certainly has made us a lot faster. I think maybe we're just not seeing the full effect in the statistics yet for a few more years.
Just very quickly, looking ahead to the next decade, we'll continue to have a record number of women in the workforce, which has got to be a good thing. There'll be a greater concern for the environment, no doubt, because the climate change movement is increasing. Will we have a more profitable Australia in 10 years' time, do you think?
Look, I really hope so, although I don't mean to end on a pessimistic note, but I do worry that we rely too much on commodity exports. They've been fantastic for us, but if for some reason the world didn't want them as much, we'd be in a very seriously bad position. The exchange rate would fall greatly. It's already been falling, in fact. So I just do wish that as a country we'd be able to develop some other industries which might not be so linked to the resource sector.
Create more productivity, create more growth, and try and change the parameters of what we work in this decade.
Yeah. The best way to do that, frankly, is the government really has to focus more on getting income taxes down so that we can attract the smartest young people to move here, to move to Australia and work, and for the biggest companies to move their regional hubs to Australia rather than Singapore and Hong Kong.
It will be just as exciting, no doubt, over the next 10 years. We'll be following what you write and say about the year ahead. Thank you so much, mate. All the very best for 2020.
That's right. Thanks very much, Chris. You too.
All right. Economics correspondent for the Australian, Adam Creighton.